You've probably heard a lot more about the rise of sports betting lately. I know I have. I've been seeing more coverage of it, but it's mostly from people on the outside. So I wanted to get a perspective on the rise of sports gambling and the brutal economics of it from a real gambler. On today's show, Malcolm and I are joined by Cody Saftic. He's been betting on mixed martial arts, that's the sport that the UFC dominates, for 2 decades. He's also a matchmaker for the regional MMA promotion, the Thick Boy Fight Club, and that is thick with 2 C's. Cody's the co-host of Bookie Beatdown, a podcast that offers full card breakdowns for UFC events. They go through every fight and discuss their gambling picks for each one. But on this episode of This Time is Different, Cody joined us to talk about the only way that gamblers can find an edge in sports betting, why so many bettors lose, and why sportsbooks know more about you than you may give them credit for. I really enjoyed his sober perspective on gambling. I hope you find it interesting as well. And thanks for listening to This Time is Different. So, Cody, I got some questions on your process, how you manage risks, some investing related topics for most of our listeners, but we got you here on a very interesting week as someone who follows the fight world closely, which is that there's these fight fixing allegations popping up in the UFC again. The most recent example is a fighter named Isaac Dalgarian, who's this sizable favorite in a fight this past weekend, and a bunch of money came in on his opponent shortly before the fight. Dalgarian then goes on to lose via a submission in sort of a suspicious fashion. And afterward, there's been more reporting coming out that UFC fighters have been offered money to throw fights. Dana White has come out vehemently against this, saying he's cooperating immediately. They're tracking betting patterns. But the fight world has often had this problem. When you look back at the history of boxing, this is nothing new. But I guess, just wanted to get your response to this storyline and these allegations going on in the UFC right now.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate. And it's not like this is something that's just only for the UFC and only for fight fans. I mean, it's happening in the NBA right now as well. So there's allegations of sport fixing. You kind of knew that was going to happen the more that these markets start opening up. Same game parlays and live betting, and everything can be done from a mobile device. Far gone are the days that you had to go to Atlantic City or you had to go to Las Vegas and you had to walk into a sports book and you had to lay down the bet. Now you can just do everything from a mobile device. So when you look at MMA, the reason why it's easy to have that edge on having someone potentially work a bout is some of these fighters on the prelims are making $12,000. Some of them are making $15,000. So if you step in and say, hey, I would offer you $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to make sure that this fight ends in this manner, then that would be big money for them. But if you look at the NBA, Rozier makes $20 million a year, and he's willing to take this money from these behind the room guys. So I don't think it's something that can ruin the sport, but it's something that can ruin all sports. Government regulators, U.S. integrity, the FBI, everyone's looking into this stuff. And it turns out that 100 bouts have been flagged. Well, if even 5% of those bouts turned in to be fixes, that's 5. That would be 5 too many. So there's a lot of happenings going on. But for Isaac Dalgarian, he's being fully investigated. The commission has withheld his purse. He's been released from the UFC. He's been released from his gym. He's been released from his management company. And if they can prove these allegations, he's going to federal prison. So not a great place to be for him.
The thing that's so surprising to me about this happening in the UFC versus, you mentioned, and the money difference is key here, right? Terry Rozier's making millions of dollars. The folks on the UFC prelims are making thousands. But it's the career consequences of an NBA player coming out of a game early are so significantly different from a UFC fighter throwing a bout, right? Where a loss in the UFC for a fighter matters so much more than a loss in the NBA. And I'll just run this take by you. That's why I have to wonder or think that this is relatively isolated on the fighter's side, but maybe not so much on the referee and judge's side.
It's possible. The thing with Terry Rozier is that if he decides I'm going to have a bad night, right, then he can come off. But that doesn't necessarily mean that his teammates and the bench players won't step up and that his team will still win anyway. So he can say there's no way I score more than 14.5 points today and get himself pulled out of the game once he gets to 14. Absolutely. And I'm sure it happens. But you can't say definitively, I won't play tonight and my team will not cover the 8.5 point spread. You don't know. Whereas in MMA, you reference Isaac Dalgarian. So Isaac Dalgarian not only loses the fight and all of this money comes in on his opponent in the 2 hours leading up to said fight is that 80% of the bets that came in against him were for him to lose, specifically by first round submission. And then he proceeded to lose by first round submission. Now, this pays plus 850. So if you were to get $100,000 on it, the payoff on it would be $850,000. You only got to work a couple fights here and there to be okay. So we could say it's an isolated incident, but 3 years ago, James Krause was banned from the sport because his fighter, Derek Minner, didn't throw the fight, but competed with a known injury, and all of his buddies, they all bet against him, and it happened. We've seen 10 years ago, another gaming probe where fighters was apparently, taking dives here and there. Rico Rodriguez back in the day, known to have dived a few. Guys like Dan Severn back in the day have known to have been working a few fights. So it's probably something that's been happening over the course of the sport, but you don't have social media back in those times. You don't have somebody notices one thing and then they put out their theory, and that you have guys that are quote unquote journalists. They have 100 followers on Twitter and they're dropping this breaking news. There's a lot of movement going on at all times that everyone gets speculated. Isaac Dalgarian had a teammate on the card. His teammate had never been finished in a professional fight or an amateur fight ever in his career. He was finished 3 minutes into the first round. He's going to be red flagged. So it's just everyone's under a lot more scrutiny now that they're under the microscope.
Does this, or let me do one more question and then I promise I'll stop hogging the ball. Does this story change your process as an MMA bettor at all? Because, one of the things I like to see in stocks is waves of insider buying, or occasionally who's putting huge money on options contracts. And I imagine, I'll admit to the listener, I'm really bad at betting on fights. I know that this is something I cannot do at a profitable level over an extended period of time. I like putting a couple bucks here and there, and it's something that honestly is a good bonding thing for my dad, my brother, and me, is that we'll ride a bet together and watch a fight. Does this change your process at all? Would you look a lot more closely at how the money is coming in before a fight as you're analyzing these yourself and making bets? Yeah,
to be honest with you, everyone's always looking at the analyticals of who's betting the money, right? But the sharp money doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to win. You can move a line a few hundred points and then the fighter comes out and still loses at the end of it. So it's difficult to just say, I will not have any process other than I'll wait to see what other people are doing. And whatever they're doing is what I'm going to jump on. It's not quite that simple. To just follow trends. But in terms of my process, a lot of the times you're looking at what is fighter A most likely to do and what is fighter B most likely to do. And then when these fights unravel and they unfold, you'll see fighter A does none of the things he's capable of. We've seen guys that were Division I All-American wrestlers take on professional kickboxers and decide to not shoot any takedowns, not make any attempt to wrestle. Would that not be considered suspicious? And I'm sure, again, it'll get looked into, but beyond that, you just gotta not overextend yourself. If you're trying to bet always on big parlays, and this is a lot of these disgruntled bettors are people that got the first 6 legs of their parlay correct, and the 7th leg happened to lose, and now they're upset, and now they're going to point the finger and say, well, this is a fixed fight, and I want my money back, and they'll start to protest to the books, please give me my money back, and this was a work, and again, nobody likes to lose. But the number one rule of gambling is don't lose what you can't afford to. And that's the number one rule that the vast majority of bettors out there are making, is they're losing their rent money or their grocery money. And then it has to be somebody else's fault. It's not their fault they pushed the button. It's somebody else's fault that the referee was on the other side, or the coach gave him bad advice, or the fighter didn't want to be there. It's human nature, right? Anything can happen on any given day. And so a guy has a bad performance. That's not necessarily anything more nefarious than that, but people will make it out to be.
I hear you on that one, but I think, Cody, the bigger issue is that we need to be able to trust to some degree that the institution in charge is capable of sussing out where the tampering happens, right? So if you just think about walking into a casino, when I walk into the MGM, even though I already know that the odds are stacked against me well in advance, in the advantage of the house, I at least know that there are certain mechanisms in place to make sure that other bettors aren't able to cheat against me also with the house, right? And I think maybe that's kind of what we're witnessing is as in, I wanted to call it investing. As betting is becoming more mainstream, as we're talking about across all platforms, not just UFC, it's, can I trust the integrity of the system itself before I place this bet? And that's the reason that we see the FBI and other heavyweight government agencies like that inserting itself very vigorously to make sure that that trust doesn't get too much eroded, because there's big money at stake for everybody, including the U.S. federal government.
Yeah, absolutely. They're taxing this money, and it's a multi-billion-dollar annual business. So I'm sure that everyone wants to keep it going smooth. But like I said, I mean, you can say this one fighter apparently took a dive, and this one basketball player apparently has been doing point shaving, and this one hockey player maybe is not performing. And it's difficult to say. It's not that they're willingly taking a dive. It's that what happens is you'll say 2 hours before fight time, Isaac Dolgarian has torn his ACL and can't wrestle. And his entire path to victory for this fight is it requires him to wrestle. And that information gets leaked, just like insider trading in stocks. I know this is about to tank. I just know it before it tanks. So when you talk about regulation, it's like, well, how can you regulate something that just has so much going on at all times? It's difficult to say. How do you regulate cryptocurrency exchanges? How do you trust the establishment that if you buy this crypto that it's going to do anything? It's difficult. It's people that are willingly putting their own money. And that's why you didn't call it investment. It's not an investment, right? You're putting your money in for some cheap thrills. And if you're any good at it, then you could possibly make money. And just like these UFC fighters, only the top 5 or 10% are actually making money. The other 90% are ruining their lives. And well, it's really the same thing with gambling, right? So people have addictive personalities, right? You can't just allow them to blow all of their life savings and then give them an out with these sports are fixed. Well, pulling the arm on a slot machine, is it fixed odds? Do you know if you pull it X amount of times you'll win? No, it's just a random occurrence. You're just doing it to see the bright lights and to pass a Saturday night off. That's a bit.
And I do think there are times where sort of the UFC's anything goes attitude can be advantageous for a better. One example recently, a guy named Lucas Almeida in Brazil. I'm sure you remember this, Cody. Guy's on a prelim, shows up to the weigh-in. His hand is ballooned up. The guy clearly has a broken hand. In the UFC, they're in Brazil. The commissions are letting this guy go in. And yes, he was a favorite. A bunch of money comes in. And then I did text my family. I'm like, hey, this is one you might want to pay attention to. And so I think there are angles where sort of that lack of trust can come to the advantage of people who are betting on this stuff.
So in that specific example, the number one person that would be in charge of that would be the Brazilian Athletic Commission. So they have a doctor and they have a commission, and the staff members do a physical on every fighter that they would have checked his hand. I don't think he had a broken hand. I think he might have an allergic reaction to something. I've been bitten in the hand by a spider before. My hand ballooned up like that. They would have checked it and said, okay, we have deemed that you are able to go out there and compete. He goes out there and he loses. Unfortunate. Did he go out there and lose willingly, or did he have this hand injury? He tried punching with the hand. Unfortunately, he got taken down, and who knows what happens after that. The thing that I find very difficult is when you look at TJ Dillashaw fought in a world title fight with a dislocated shoulder, and he loses very quickly. And Magomed Ankalaev recently just lost to Pereira for a world title fight, and then he comes out and says he was getting injections to his ribs because he has this rib injury. So it's a rough contact sport. Nobody competing is coming in with no injuries. They're all banged up. They all have bad hips. They all have bad knees. They all have bad shoulders. They all have a hamstring injury. But they're forced to compete. And they're not forced to compete, but in a way they are. If you are a NFL player and you decide, I can't play this week, I'm just going to sit it out. Well, you have a certain amount of guaranteed money, and you have a certain amount of signing bonus, and you have a certain amount of health care, and you can sit out a few weeks and get healthy and still get paid. In fact, league minimum, I don't know league minimum, but in the NHL, it's like $800,000. Have to assume it's probably roughly, if not better, in the NFL. You're still making your money. Isaac Dolgarian's been competing in the UFC for 2.5 years. In the 2.5 years he's been with the UFC, he's competed 3 times where he's gone 2-1. His contract was 12 plus 12, which he won, 14 plus 14, which he lost, 16 plus 16, which he won. In 3 fights with the UFC over 2.5 years, he's made equivalent to $65,000. He would be a broke man. He's a professional athlete that needs to travel all over Denver and Missouri for training. He has a strength and conditioning coach. He has a Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach. He's got a striking coach. He's got a nutritionist. You're not buying McDonald's value pick meal. You got to go get the good organic food. You got to put the good supplements in your body. And maybe he has a few sponsors. But the bottom line is, a manager at McDonald's is better off financially than Isaac Dolgarian. So now he's preparing for this fight last Saturday. And this is just we're just going to throw out this situation out there. Let's say he breaks his rib, or he's got pneumonia, or he breaks his ankle. And he's got a wife and kids. And he's not fought in the last 6 months. If he pulls out with this fight, he will get paid $0. Then he's got to sit on the sidelines for 6 more months. That's 1 year without collecting a paycheck. 1 year. He's behind on his mortgage. He's going to get evicted and lose his house. He's behind on his car payments. He's about to get repossessed. His wife's stressed. His kids don't have everything they need. He feels inadequate as a man, but he's pursuing his dream of being a professional athlete. And he just broke his rib. Do you think that this guy's going to pull out of the fight? It has nothing to do with somebody coming to him and saying, I will pay you $50,000 to throw the fight. Nothing to do with that. It's everything to do with he financially cannot pull out of the fight. So as a man, he's made the decision, for the betterment of my family, I'm going to go out there and I'll try to win. There's just no chance that I win because I'm injured. And if it was Jose Aldo or George St. Pierre or John Jones, they would have pulled out because they've got money and they've got investments and they've got a stock portfolio and they've got other things going on. Guys on the undercard, they don't got that. So if you're his coach or you're a training partner or you're somebody that's just close to him, you're his cousin, and you say, I know, I've spoken to him. He's not going to win this fight. He's hurt. He's just hoping to get that show money, plus the Reebok money for wearing their shoes and their shorts. Plus he got a sponsorship that he signed a few autographs for a few $1,000, and he's looking to patch bills off at home and help his family, right? You wouldn't call that guy a cheat. He did the noble thing, but the disgruntled bettor at home got screwed as a result of him deciding to compete. Where do you find the edges? Know the guy, know his cousin, know the guy that knows he's hurt, know the guy that's at the gym. Find a contact in every gym and talk to them. You seen this guy around? How's he been doing? You know, he's been walking with a bit of a limp to him. Actually, he hasn't been here. He's been sick. You know what? Actually, he was sick 2 weeks ago, but I can confirm he's still on antibiotics. He's having a really bad weight cut. Guy hasn't eaten in a week. That's your edge. Find the insider info. Otherwise, you're just throwing darts at a board and hoping they're both 100% healthy, which they never are. So just the game that everybody plays, right? Every sport's probably the same. Guys are hurt going in and you're not getting all the information. Hockey, they tell you it's a lower body injury. What do you mean it's a lower body or it's an upper body injury? What is it his hand? Is it his shoulder? Is it his knee? It's the upper part of his body or it's the lower part of his body. They never give you the full story, right?
I was just thinking it's interesting that you gave that comparison because by contrast, a rookie in the NFL who plays the entire season is going to make about $850,000. And that same guy is also thinking the same thing. I can't support all of the people who depend on me on this money alone. I've got to play. I can't take the risk of losing one game check because I've got all these people who depend on me and all this system that I have to maintain. And so that guy is going to go out there and play on a bad ankle, bad ribs, concussion that he's hiding, those kinds of things, which potentially could harm the long-term, tenure of his career, but also, to your point, for a lot more money. And so just putting in that context, you're talking about somebody earning less than a manager at McDonald's to go out here and compete in one of the most brutal sports there is. That puts it in context just how serious it is for the guys lining up against each other.
So last year, I think it was last year, maybe it was a couple years ago, we had a UFC fight night in Denver. It was Tracy Cortez and Rose Namajunas. We also had Gene Silva versus Drew Dover, which I'll remember for a very long time. Also, Charles Johnson versus Joshua Van, which was incredible to see in person. And what I noticed is my buddy and I, we were in the balcony, and just first of all, the place was pretty much filled up for the first fight for a 6-7 hour event, which was incredible to see. And the second thing I noticed was just in between the fights, it seemed like 1 in 5 phones were lit up to DraftKings of people just making bets before the fight. And that doesn't even include the people who bet on the fights before they went to the arena. And I know you've been following this for a long time. Just from your perspective, how have you seen the interest in it's not just sports gambling, MMA gambling, in your perspective? How have you seen that change over the past decade or so?
Yeah, absolutely. It's taken off because if you go back 10, 15 years ago, there was no apps that were taking action on MMA. Then it eventually became, well, they'll take action on the UFC main card. And then eventually they'll take action on the full UFC. And then it graduated to other leagues like Bellator and PFL and One Championship and KSW and Octagon MMA and Tough Enough and Cage Warriors. And now it's just a conglomerate that There's fights happening every weekend all over the world. And, it's right at your fingertips and you're able to make plays whenever you want. And so I feel like social media, even though it's brought everybody closer together, everybody seems to be a lot more drawn apart and a lot more reclused. People aren't going to bars. They aren't going. And I mean, look at the numbers. The numbers are down. People are spending less time having beers with their friends at social events and more time sitting at home, ordering Uber Eats and gambling on their phone. So like anything, there's more people doing it. There's more of a market for it. On my side of things, MMA is a much smaller sport. But when I started my show, we were the only people that would do full card breakdowns. Within the first year, there was 5 guys doing full card breakdowns. 14 years later, there's thousands of shows doing full card breakdowns. Back when I started, you had to have a Bodog account. That was pretty much the only game in town. Then eventually they had a MyBookie. Then eventually they had a 5 Dimes. Look at now, there's thousands of books out there. There's different regulators and you can change your VPN and you can get access to that. Some people get banned. So they'll start buying beard accounts. Then they'll say, hey, let me make my wagers on your account, not cut you in. And so it's a way to get around it. A lot of the time, sharp money is all coming from one person who's got 100, upwards of 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 accounts and is able to get this money. It looks like it's coming in from New Hampshire and Vermont and Ohio and Indiana and Canada. But it's really one guy on the phone from one area placing the bets, just the way it is, right? So the government's got their hands full with it, but like anything, like cryptocurrency, I'm sure they're trying to stay ahead of it. It's just it evolves so quickly, and there's such a demand for it, and there's ways around everything, and you can still get the action down if you please. That it's a completely different thing than it was 10 years ago, and I expect it to keep going that way. It's just if you're into history and you read a lot about books, it's like the fall of a lot of societies ends up coming back to gambling, and the disconnect between trying to be a contributing member of society and civilization and just kind of drinking and watching sports and gambling, it takes your mind off of more pressing issues. And so that's kind of what it feels like things are going towards. But there's a lot more wrong with the world right now than gambling. It's just a piece that's adding to this sad society that we're starting to see.
I think
you just read my mind, Cody. I was actually going to ask you just before you went there whether this societal shift toward more of an openness and an acceptance of gambling continues through the remainder of this decade. Not even, what brings it to its knees ultimately, eventually, like you just said, but whether there's another 5 years of staying power in this current love affair with gambling all over the place, right? We saw it with the poly markets getting the U.S. election right, even though all of the different networks, all of the different pollsters, all the different journalists, everybody just about got this one wrong one way or another. And I think that really opened up people's eyes to the fact that there is some relevance to this one-time fragmented part of the world out there to now really making its way. We saw a $2 billion, I think, investment from the New York Stock Exchange into poly markets. Like, that's how institutionalized this has become. So I was curious if you thought that this would continue this way at this pace or even harder over the next 5 years, let alone, 20 years from now.
Yeah, I think it's just getting started. And I love this industry and I love my people and I love doing the content and I love making the picks, but I don't want to compare it to a crack epidemic at all, but similar to other addictions, because we can't deny it. There's a mobile porn addiction going around, right? Not going around, it's probably already been there, but people didn't used to have mobile devices. So they would go to a video store and they would buy a VHS and they may watch the VHS a few times. Now you've got people that it's at their fingertips, so they can watch it all the time. Smoking cigarettes is an addiction. There's addictions that are not necessarily you panhandling in the streets, but there's things that certain people have addictive personalities, and it gets a grasp of them a lot quicker than they can know what's going on. So I think just similar to vaping, right? Nobody vaped. People smoke cigarettes. Now you look how things have changed over the last 20 years. Nobody smokes. Everybody vapes. I think with gambling, it's like it's only kind of still in its infancy, although it's as old as time itself. I think people have been gambling since the dawn of time. What are the first sports in the world? Horse racing and boxing. You don't think people are betting on horse racing and boxing? Of course. In fact, horse racing is only a sport of gambling. If you weren't allowed to gamble on horse racing, why would anybody do it? Why would anybody watch it? So there's going to be a shift. There's going to be a shift where now we're into, parlays, and we're into betting, Toronto sports, and it's basketball and it's football and it's hockey, and you have so much and people are getting sponsorship deals. And you saw the books, right? They'd say, oh, this is a new betting company and they've got a $3 million marketing budget. So they start to sponsor. Tom Brady's got a sponsorship, and Michael Jordan's talking about a sponsorship, and Brad Pitt does a commercial where he's talking about how when I'm at the barbecue and I'm bored, I go on my app and I make some bets. And so this starts to become a part of society where it's like, oh, everybody's doing it, and it continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? At what point does, somebody just have it on their phone and they don't realize what they're getting themselves into until the bill comes at the end of the month, and then they can't afford to pay the bill, and then they end up in shambles. So after 20 years of this, after 25 years of this, the same way that you've seen Alcoholics Anonymous become a thing, the same way that, these different groups become a thing, Gamblers Anonymous will have to step up at some point and be like, we have a giant influx of people that have lost their life savings pursuing this idea that I can get lucky and go on this big run. And it's different when you go to the casino. The casino can just eject you. If you're playing the slot machine and you run out of money to put into the slot machine, that's the end of it. You can't suddenly just, I don't know, maybe you can get an extension on your credit card. Maybe you can go get a line of credit on your home, or maybe you can destroy your portfolios and dump everything and try to put it back into the slot machine. But it would still require you driving places and doing things. When you have a phone and you can just sit there and click buttons and add accounts and go into money that you think you know what? I lost 100. So I'm now going to bet 200 to win my 100 back. And now you're down 300, but it's okay. Because if I just bet 300, I win that 300 back. And now you're down 600. Well, and it's a snowball effect. So all I can say is responsible gaming. Don't do it if you're in a dire situation. Don't do it if it's your last case scenario. Like anything, I believe you, I don't know if you said this on the show or before we came on the show. You said, it was before we came on the show. You said, I really like having you and Malcolm here because Malcolm, the financial advisor route, and you, professional gambler. I don't consider myself a professional gambler. I have multiple jobs. I have multiple sources of income. Gambling is simply something that I enjoy. And I enjoy breaking down fights, and I enjoy breaking down the entire thing. And if you couldn't bet on the fight, would I say to myself, I don't like it that much? No, I used to watch fights long before I knew you could put money down on it. But like anything, if you're going to spend 10,000 hours watching something, then maybe you have an edge. Most people aren't spending their time doing the research. They don't know who these guys are. They're listening to shows. They're saying, Pete likes this guy, and I listened to this other show, and he said he didn't like that guy, and then on a 20-minute whim, they'll make their bets. It's irresponsible approach to it. And so when I hear disgruntled gamblers, you'll never hear that of me. You'll never hear I got screwed on this decision. For the record, I had money on the guy that lost last week on Isaac Dalgarian. I had a good amount of money on Isaac Dalgarian. I'm not sour that he took the dive. I pushed the button. It was my choice.
So interesting.
Don't put yourself in a bad spot where you're like desperate, right?
Interestingly enough, one of the things that we have started to do, not necessarily because of the world's fascination and potential, to your point, I'm nobody's doctor, so I'll say potential just to be safe, addiction to gambling that is formed and kind of spawned out of control. We as practitioners in my firm, one of the things that we do is create for clients what we call a sidecar account, which is a place where we encourage them to park the money that they otherwise would be gambling in the markets with. Because one of the things that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up is anytime a client says to me, I want to play in the markets, or I want to play the markets. Like, that is such a terrible mindset to have when it comes to approaching investing. Like, either we're investing or we're gambling. Let's call it what it is and approach it that way. And in creating that sidecar account, we don't include it in any of the projections that we run to help you determine whether you're on track to hit whatever the goal is that we're trying to hit, right? So if you've got $100,000 in this Robinhood account, in this Coinbase account, in this whatever separate account that we know about, we can track that it exists. But if it were to go to vapor and disappear tomorrow morning, it's not going to rock your world so that all of the other things that we're trying to accomplish can't get done. One, it probably saves more marriages than we recognize it does. But two, to your point about responsible gaming, I think it also helps people put limits around just how much risk they're willing to take. Because when all of a sudden you look and Ethereum is down roughly 30% over the last month, Bitcoin's down about 17, 18% over the last month, you go, oh shoot, I just lost X amount of dollars. I should throw another $40,000 at it because it's got to come back. And then now it's down 50% from that. And now I got to throw another 50. This keeps you from being able to do that. So I guess in the way that I'm framing this, I'm also giving an anecdote for the listener who has this problem to maybe separate your real life money, your long-term money from what you actually will be putting into the markets on a whim, on a taking that level of risk, just to make sure that those two things don't get conflated together for too long.
And if the book was on board with putting up a safety net for people, they could say, listen, we've got this account. And then for every dollar you lose, we'll put 10% from 10 cents on the dollar into a side account for you every time you lose. If you win, we're not adding anything. If you're up over the month, we're not adding anything. If you're down, these are your total losses. And believe me, they know your numbers on every single sport. And as a whole, every year, it's all tracked very thoroughly. Then at some point they could say, hey, you've lost $10,000 with us. Some people have lost $100,000. Some people have lost $1 million. We'll give you back that 10%. You can click this button, you can fill up the form, and you can get that 10%. And as you do this, your account is terminated with us. You never gamble with us again. When I was a kid, my dad.
I'm just going to go to the other book across the street though.
You could. So you'll say, well, I'm just going to take my 10%. I go to this other book across the street. And then these guys, you should know, a lot of these books are operated by the same entity at the end of it. So if I try to sign up with my name, Cody Saftic, and I've been banned by a couple books. If I try to make a new account with them, they know. I had a buddy, his account got blacklisted because I had used his IP address one time to access mine. So they're thorough. They know where the money's coming in. It's whether they believe you're a sharp bettor or that you are, a fish. And if they think that they can make money off the account, no problem. You can take that money, you can go across the street, you can do whatever you want. If there was maybe some type of regulation of, we'll give you something back, but you've got to sign away that you won't gamble no more, or that we're going to send this out, then maybe. All I can really say is it's anecdotal. When I was a kid, my dad's best friend, this Ron Pigeon, great guy, Pidge, and he was just very competitive. I thought he was very competitive. He wanted to play $20 a hole whenever you golfed. He wanted to bet you $5 that he could throw this crunched up piece of paper into this bucket. He always wanted to compete. Well, it turns out he was a really bad gambler. And at some point he walked into the casino and he asked them, could you guys ban me? They didn't ban him. He asked, could you guys ban me? And they took it very seriously. They said, no problem at all. They had his picture was posted. The Ontario Gaming, the AGCO, they put it out to all of the Ontario Lottery and Gaming. If he was to walk into any casino in Ontario, you have to hand them your driver's license as you're going in. That he's just red flagged. He had to make that choice for himself. They weren't going to say you're banned. They love him coming in here and giving them all their money. But there has to be a way for someone to say, I don't want to do this anymore. And even though 3 weeks from now, when you get your work paycheck and you sold that baseball you've had listed online and you got a few bucks, right? There has to be something that's not, I got a few bucks, I'm putting it right back in. It's like, no, man, I'll give you 10 cents on the dollar for everything you lost here. And you can't do this no more. Maybe for a period of 12 months, maybe for a period of a few years. Maybe it'll never happen. I'm just saying, if I'm trying to think of like what can be done is, you gotta maybe just ban people. Ban people even though it's bad for your business and you're not gonna be making money. Like, it's what's best for them. Therefore, it's what's best for their family. And therefore, it's what's best for their community. And therefore, it's what's best for their city or their state or their country. You want these people going out and spending the money in their town and go buy a pizza and go buy a coffee and go buy some stuff from the craft store. Spend the money within your community, not I'm sending it into this offshore in Costa Rica constantly, right? So I don't know.
Those ones for sure aren't going to ban you. The offshore accounts can ban you. I guess they're not going to just be like, hey, you're losing too much money and we're going to kick you out.
They don't. Yeah, they don't.
I I want to bring this to investing a little bit because I think there are things that gamblers can learn from investors. I think there are things that investors can learn from gamblers. And one of the things that I've seen just from watching fights, and for me, it's something I might like for a whole card, I'm maybe putting $20 down. And one of the things I noticed is I have my own biases when I'm looking at these things. So for example, I'm in Denver, so I'm constantly thinking these guys and girls in Denver, they have great cardio. That's a huge advantage. That's maybe something I overweight. Or I'll see a heavyweight fight, and boy, do I like a greasy underdog in a heavyweight fight, because in there, one punch can change anything. But in reality, for a lot of heavyweight fights, there are levels to this game. And if you're at a higher level, especially when there's fewer just people in the mix, you have an extreme advantage. So I guess from you doing this, Cody, for 20 years, is this something where you've had to realize, like, I have a behavioral bias when I'm analyzing fights in this way, and it's something that you have to check and watch as you're looking at these fights?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure everybody has different theories and people will create models, and I had this AI model look over it, or I created my own model and I ran this. But the bottom line is that to be a profitable handicapper, you could win as little as 55% of the time, and you lose 45% of the time. And over the course of the year, you'll come out on top, right? With other people, they're hitting at a 65% clip and they're still losing money. If you don't want to do any of the research and you don't want to know how to do any of the tape study and you don't want to check out all that, just the younger fighter wins 67% of the time. So you can just bet the younger fighter in every fight. But is that going to make you money over the long term? No, absolutely not. Maybe on the short term, you hit a little spell where that was the case. Over the course of the year, this is what it averages out to. But once you look at specific, well, this guy was a 2-1 favorite and he was the younger guy and he won and you made half of your money back. Or half the 50 cents on the dollar. And then this other guy, well, he was the younger guy and he was a huge favorite and I lost on that one. I lost money. So it never averages it out. It's basically you're just trying to take things on a case by case. There's theories like you said, heavyweights. Why not take the heavyweight underdog? You mentioned Denver. Not only do you think fighters from Denver have better altitude, but if the card takes place in Denver and they're fighting at altitude, I mean, everybody tends to get tired. Heavyweights tend to get tired even more. I've got a heavyweight from the Denver area as a betting underdog on the card at altitude, then yeah, absolutely. Women's MMA fights. More underdogs hit in women's MMA than men's MMA. So why not just bet all the women's MMA underdogs? It's just these are cop-out systems where it's like, last year it was 67%, but next year it could only be 58%. There's no surefire way of saying it. And if you said, well, I looked at the last 10 years, well, that could be skewed because the first 6 years it happened all the time, but the last 4 years it really hasn't. So for me, I look at it. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in anything other than just like, human movement. You watch enough fights, you see enough guys, you know who's a good athlete, you know who's durable, you know who can take a punch. And like anything can happen. You could slip on a banana peel and blow your knee out. You could bob when you were supposed to weave and get kicked in the head. You zigged when you should have zagged. Of course, it's sports, it's life. Anything can happen. A bus could run right through your house and kill you in your sleep. Who knows? But it is possible. It's just very highly unlikely. So I look at every fight as a case by case. You're looking at it, what's the most highest percent likelihood that this fighter would win? And let's say I could guarantee you guys right now. I said, Malcolm, Ricky, I've got a lock. This guy wins 90%. Guarantee he wins 90%. Well, here's the thing. This isn't the Chicago Bulls. They're not playing 82 times over the course of the year and they're waiting at an 80% clip or a 90% clip. He's fighting one time. So that one time, it happens to be the 10% he loses. And that's it. They'll never fight again. You can't get your money back on the long run. You just got to make it in that one go. So, I bet a lot of parlays because the thought process here for me is more so you want to risk low and win big. Oh, sounds so easy. I get it. It's easy to laugh at. But being that if you bet $100 on this fighter at minus 200, you could win $50. And then you got to win again and you win your $100. And then you bet it again, but he loses and there goes the $100. Whereas a parlay, yeah, I think that's what most people are they find it thrilling. And you can bet $10 and potentially win $30,000. If I went to a bar and I sat down and I'm eating some chicken wings and I'm having a beer and the guy next to me says, I've got $20 right there, slams it on the table. I got $20. Tell me a fight I want to make some money. Would you say, yeah, bet the $20 on this guy. Well, how much will I make? $10. Do you think he's interested in that? No, he's at the bar. He's having chicken wings. He's having the $20 is gone. He don't care, but he doesn't want to bet $20 to make 10. He wants to bet $20 to win 100. He wants to bet $20 to win 200. That's what these people get caught into. Or as I'm sure Malcolm could tell you, I have a financial advisor myself. I don't know anything about finances. I don't know anything about stock market. I don't know anything about RSPs. So let him do it. And we get a 10% return on the year, a 12% on the return year. Some years it's kick ass. Some years it's not great. It's 4%. There's money coming in year after year, right? This is not like that. They're not looking to make 10 cents on the dollar. They're not looking to make, I bet $100 and I profited 15 tonight. And I'm going to do it again next week. That's a good return. Now they want to make $1,000 on their $100 and give it all back next week. So it just depends on the person, depends on the gambler, depends on the human being, I guess. But there's probably different ways that could be looked at.
Malcolm, anything you want to make sure we hit before we wrap up?
No, I think Cody hit it. It's a mindset differential between the person who just flat out loves gaming in the way that you're describing and is not interested in anything less, right? Like I could look over there at what the stock market is doing right now, which has actually been for the last 3 years, just the best place to be invested. And you have plenty of people who look at that and say, yeah, that's not good enough for me.
Like, I'm gonna buy Bitcoin instead. It's like, but why? But why? Because
not even. I'm gonna buy these.
Triple.
I'm gonna buy these altcoins that'll be a 10 bagger in 6 weeks versus owning something like Nvidia that's just been a perennial outperformer for the last 3 years. No, that's not good enough for me. I need this other thing that's way out there on the spectrum. And so I take your point that I think there's just different types of people out there. People are wired very differently. But to the point that you made earlier on in this conversation, social media has made it so that the loud minority is so much louder than the quiet majority that we assume that everybody is living this way. And in reality, most of us are okay with the returns of the S&P 500 or something else. We're just being enticed by what we see happening from the few people who really are professionals making a living in gaming. And that's where people are getting caught up.
Yeah, it's the bright lights. It's the fast money. People always want to take the shortcut, right? Get rich quick scheme. So yeah, instead of waiting and maxing it, if you just gave a financial advisor $500 a month and that's it, and keep contributing, right? Then over the next 10, 20 years, you're going to have money right there set for you. And it's fun to look at the stocks and it's fun to see stuff are up or maybe stuff is down. But yeah, this is more of there's a loneliness going on right there. And just like social media, when you look at pictures and you look at family vacations and you look at, it's the good. They show you the good that's happening in their life. I had a great lunch and I went to this concert, and it would show you the bad. Social media shows you very little of the bad, focuses on the good. Gambling social media, it's the same thing. You see a lot of winners. You always see winning tickets. People cannot help themselves. They hit a good ticket, I gotta let everybody know. You don't see the losing tickets. You don't see all that. Stock market, you see that. You see if it crashes. You see if the stocks are down. There's transparency there, where there's not really. People will say the biggest realization for me was COVID. I think it's 2019, maybe 2020. No sports are happening. There's no football. There's no hockey. There's no baseball. Fighting's not allowed to happen. They had to go to Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. And the books start running. They were taking action on two things. The two hottest sellers during the early portion of COVID, right? It was marble racing and NBA 2019 simulations. So they would simulate the New York Knicks versus the Milwaukee Bucks, and you could bet on the simulated video game, and you could also bet marble racing, where you would give them $10 and there's 20 marbles, and they would just let the marbles run down the track, and the first marble to hit the ball. So people are they're lonely. And they're bored and they're looking for some instant type of action. And if I walk into a bar and why is tennis on? I don't want to watch tennis. Well, that's what's on. I'll put $50 on that guy to beat that guy. I'm in on this tennis game all of a sudden. And this tennis game is the only thing I got going on today. And this is really high stakes. So I think it's you're not getting together with your friends and going and playing a sport or playing a game or playing a board game and then you're on your phone the whole time and you're trying to get this game. No, that happens when you've got nothing to do and you're sitting around with all the time in the world. You're going to start clicking buttons. So, again, going to a casino, the casino would tell you, this person's been here for 3 days and this person wets themselves and doesn't move and this person gives you everything they got, right? But a phone with an app, it's a 24/7 casino. You could be on it all the time. So, yeah, I hope people just do the right things, man. But I get lumped in sometimes where it's like, these guys are degenerate gamblers and these guys are bad gamblers and these guys they think gambling is a way to make a quick buck. And I'm very realistic about it. I understand full well. And I just want to make sure that other people do as well and that no one's hurting themselves long term, not hurting their families or not creating a disconnect between them and people that they like spending time with because they're just becoming reclusive and playing this stuff. So I don't know. Who knows? It's a distraction. And I think everyone's just looking for a distraction these days.
Cody Saftic, I appreciate the very sober perspective. As someone who is a fan of combat sports, I think you and Paul Shaughnessy do just an incredible amount of research and have a good show in Bookie Beatdown, even if you're not interested in gambling, which I think this show, if you were thinking about gambling, probably turned you off to it. But I think that you and Paul do a good show. And honestly, I think you guys are, in my view, the best preview show when you're looking at a UFC pay-per-view or a fight card coming out. So it's Bookie Beatdown. I think you guys do a really nice job and appreciate you taking the time to join us on this show.
I appreciate you reaching out. Honestly, I know you sent it through the Thick Boy Fight Club. And I don't even know, how'd you even find out about those guys? Is it online or?
Yeah. So I remember you said something about being a matchmaker.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I'll figure out the promotion and then tracked you down that way.
Information shared in this recording and by its guests represent the views and opinions of the guests and does not represent the views or opinions of the host. This content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. This content is not, nor is it intended to be a substitute for professional financial advice. It is always recommended that you seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your personal financial situation.